Hello and welcome to the Night Owl Philanthropy podcast, and I'm your host Dean Jones, and this is the series I ask charity leaders and changemakers to tell us about their why, their purpose, experience and values that sit behind their work. Each episode goes beyond job titles and campaigns to uncover the real stories and motivations behind social impact leadership and what it takes to stay resilient, purposeful and compassionate in a demanding sector. Today we're exploring those themes through the lens of homelessness, corporate responsibility and business leaders who step onto the pavement for a night. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Bianca Robinson, CEO of CEO Sleep Out, a UK charity that gets senior executives sleeping rough to raise funds, confront poverty head on and spark lasting action through their networks. Bianca, thank you so much for joining me. Let's start, as we always do on this podcast, with that central question. What is your why? What sits at the heart of your work on homelessness and CEO Sleep Out?
I mean, it's a huge question, Dean, isn't it? It's a huge question. But I wanted to do something that gave me a sense of personal fulfillment. And there is a story, as I'm sure you can imagine. I was asked to join CEO Sleep Out, so I didn't set it up. But the person who set it up is a chap by the name of Andy Preston. And he ended up becoming the elected mayor of Middlesbrough. We didn't work in the same business, but we shared a building. I was running a web and creative agency, and he was running his property development company, and we were working out of the same building. So he often sort of stopped by to twist my arm for various projects that he was working on. He set up a charity called the Middlesbrough and Teesside Philanthropic Foundation. And that kind of like got me quite interested, because I just thought, actually, do you know what? He's doing something meaningful here. He's ploughing money back into the front line in Middlesbrough and Teesside. I don't know if you know, Dean, but some of the highest deprivation postcodes in the country exist around the Teesside area, so Middlesbrough, which is where I was working and near where I live. This is actually a really great thing to get business to actually engage in communities, in their local charities doing amazing work. So I sort of indicated to him that, life at Calm Digital, although I was growing the company year on year, it was kind of not fulfilling me in the way that I hoped it would. It felt like, going out winning business, putting it through a sausage factory, churning it out the other end, chasing the invoice next. And I did say this to him, and I don't think he registered, anything. It was just kind of conversation. But years later, I'm talking about 4 years later, I got a phone call out of the blue when I had sold my share back to the shareholders of that particular company. I was freelancing. I was doing a digital marketing and brand consultancy, but I was also lecturing. I got this phone call out of the blue. It was Andy Preston, and he said, Bianca, he said, I've got something that I think you'd be fantastic at, and I really need help with, and I think you'll find it very fulfilling. So what is it? And he said, well, I need someone to help me drive the CEO Sleep Out forward. And I'd done the first ever CEO Sleep Out in Middlesbrough. He twisted my arm to do that in 2013. I thought it was an amazing idea, even though I woke up colder than I've ever been in my life. But we did. We raised about 50 grand to share out around local charities. It was absolutely a brilliant thing. And as a result, I said, I'll give you, I was so busy, but I said, I'll give him a day a week. And that day a week became 4 days a week. Then it became my life. And then I became CEO just about a year later. So yeah, it was a fast track to personal fulfillment, but it did tick all of the boxes. It was my personal values. Yes, I was doing something that made a difference. I was doing something that made a difference to my local area and communities, but also more broadly than that. I was using my skill set. I was using skills I didn't even know I had. So the kind of personal fulfillment factor went way up here. So that's why from my personal fulfillment perspective, but also there's another why, which is I grew up in Wellington, New Zealand, and I grew up as a child, born in the 70s, but did my childhood growing up in the 80s. There was not one single rough sleeper in Wellington. Well, maybe there's one, and he was called Blanket Man. But everybody knew him and everybody looked after him. But there wasn't rough sleepers lining any of the streets or anything. When I landed in London, 1997, and I walked down the Strand and I walked through Leicester Square past Cardboard City, I actually couldn't believe that people were carving out an life and existence living like that. It shocked me to the absolute core, Dean. And I ended up going to live in Edinburgh. And London is one thing. Edinburgh, the temperature can drop to minus 20 degrees on a winter's night. And you had people almost lined up on the Lothian Road in sleeping bags. And I was thinking, you were saying, how are you going to get through the night? Well, if I get enough, I'll be able to get a hostel, sort of is the answer. But you think if the temperature drops, these people, definitely at risk of death. And I don't know what those people did, but I was only very young, at the time. And so that really stayed with me. And I thought, if I can do something about this, I will. And so now I am.
That was a really comprehensive understanding of what stimulated your interest in this area and why you've continued to support it in the way you have. For listeners who may not know you fully yet, how do you sort of introduce yourself when you talk about what being CEO of CEO Sleep Out involves on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I'm Bianca Robinson. I'm a Kiwi. I am not from here. I live in the northeast of England on a cliff top overlooking the North Sea. The beach is called Saltburn. I call it the real Saltburn.
Yeah.
Movie, but it's a fabulous beach and a fabulous place to live. And you are viewing me in my box room where CEO Sleep Out, the engine room, takes place. But we do 20 plus cities every year across the UK. We bring business leaders together for a night sleeping beneath the stars, no matter how cold. Mm-hmm. And it's a massive opportunity for a wake-up call to really understand some of the big issues going on in the local community to do with inequality, poverty, homelessness, hunger. And it's a call to action for businesses. It's a wake-up call. So it's get involved. What more can you do? In terms of my role, I'm the kind of the chief motivator in chief, I would say, is what I am. I get the message out. I get people excited. I get them ramped up about it. And until 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I was really doing everything myself. I now have a fantastic team. Not a huge team, but a fantastic team of 2 prized sort of people who work on a consultancy basis that I couldn't do without, and 1 full-time staff member. So very, very happy with how that's all gone, and very steady and slow, very lean charity. We don't want to keep the money. We don't want to be spending all the money ourselves. So we make sure that money goes straight out to the communities where it's raised to do the good it needs to do.
Great. Thank you for that. So you mentioned you're joining us from Saltburn, all the way up in the north. What's your day look like so far with the team or with any of the CEOs that you're working with? Does your life as a CEO to CEO Sleep Out ever stop?
Never stops. And even when I'm on holiday, I can't really put an out of office on. Like I say, it has changed a bit. So the years I was doing it all on my own. Andy Preston supported me until he became elected mayor of Middlesbrough as much as he could. And, to an extent, he still does as a trustee of the charity. But I don't, obviously, I kind of built an engine. I've built all the processes, but I was doing it all myself, which meant all the liaison building, trying to kind of establish an event in a new city, finding the business audience to participate, finding ambassadors who would talk about it on my behalf, all the marketing and all of that kind of stuff I kind of did on my own. And also there was kind of processes registering individuals and making sure they got a shout out on social media, and nothing was automated. It was all manual. And so there were times where, I would literally be working 100-hour weeks and then sleeping out sometimes twice a week. Mm-hmm. So it was quite tough. Things have changed a lot now. And I'm hoping with AI, we can actually continue to automate a lot more in terms of some of those processes. But now I've got people in place to help me deliver those. It's much, much better. But a day in the life for me is I do my desk work in the box room, and there's still quite a lot of desk work. For example, this week, I've primarily been making sure the grants are going out to all the charities who took part in the autumn season of last year. So there's about 80 charities that are very shortly to receive significant amounts of funding through their efforts at CEO Sleep Out and our efforts at CEO Sleep Out last year. And the total, I just totaled up this morning. The grants out total over 500,000 last year.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I was very proud of that. And I think, we can make sure that we can give that amount of money away to make a difference in charities and communities right across the UK, every year, and increase that number every year. I'd be a happy person.
Is there a method to sort of determining which organisations receive that support? Does it tend to be organisations that sit within the sort of geographical locations that you've had a sleep out in, or is there something else to your decision on that?
That's primarily who will receive the support. So each CEO Sleep Out, let's take Milton Keynes because that's where you're based, Dean. So we set up a CEO Sleep Out in Milton Keynes in 2018. the Stadium MK wanted to host it, which was fantastic. So very grateful to them. And I had an ambassador, a woman in business called Jo Carter, who was part of Concept Onyx personnel. And she wanted to, I guess she wanted to ingratiate herself in the network and get to know people. So she actually used CEO Sleep Out as an icebreaker. So she was able then to spread the word and help build the participants. But part of the job of setting that up is actually looking at all the charities in the area, thinking who's doing great grassroots work, who's on the ground making a difference. Very quickly, we identified the YMCA in Milton Keynes, and then we asked them for the recommendations of other partners, and it was this amazing it became this amazing basket of partners as it grew. It started off with just the YMCA and the MK Dons. But as it grew, we got this amazing basket, which is now Unity MK, bus shelter, etc. So that's kind of how we identify. We do get that local knowledge, and we ask people who's making a difference. We then do due diligence, make sure they do what they say they're going to do, make sure their impacts are doing what they say they're going to do, and make sure they're accountable. So although we offer unrestricted funding, we now ask for a very kind of it's like a non-binding impact statement, really, is what it is, so that we can actually tell a story. It's just for our storytelling purposes, but we want to say the YMCA in Milton Keynes has used money from CEO Sleep Out to do X, Y, Z and change so-and-so's lives. And they'll do that for us now, Dean. So that just gives you an example of how we try and find. We like grassroots charities. We like charities who are actually tirelessly making a difference, and they're not a big machine. So although we have given to shelter and bigger charities based on the wishes of fundraising participants, we tend towards smaller, more local, harder working grassroots charities that really need those funds and can really make those funds stretch and make them go a long way.
It's a great example of collaboration on a national scale, but where a donor can actually see the impact of the support they provided in quite a sort of tangible way, because it's going to place-based organisations where support is focused on that local area. I think the model itself is fantastic, and the fact that you can then, not evidence, and you mentioned the word impact, but you're asking for light touch impact reports, really, that give a visual stimulus in terms of what you're doing, which I think is what a lot of people are looking for, that sort of tangible record of what's happened with their money.
Yeah, we want to be able to tell that story, Dean, and it's important for us because people, we've got to be very transparent about where our money goes. It's all listed on our website. Anyone can search through it and figure it all out and see it right there in black and white. But we do sometimes struggle to tell the story of where the money goes, because once you've left that city and we're announcing the figures and each charity's got their bit, it's much harder to collate all that information. But hopefully we've now got a process in place where we've made it a bit easier for ourselves to collate it and tell a story.
You've talked about what drew you to this issue and your motivation for being involved in this. Do you have a particular moment that you can remember that made homelessness feel personal rather than a distant issue?
I have been homeless.
You have?
I have actually been homeless. Yes, I have. It's a kind of homeless called sofa surfing.
Yeah.
And I was in London as a very young woman. I was aged 23 and I'd finished a nannying job and I had yet to find additional work, and I literally had nowhere to go. And a friend of mine called Lucy put me up on her sofa. And I was probably 5 weeks sofa surfing there and looking for work. And then I got a job, but obviously I didn't get paid till the end of the month. So I was there until my first paycheck, and then I went and got a flat. But it was quite tough, and I probably didn't recognize it at the time. But I was in a very vulnerable situation. I think I was quite gung-ho about it at the time, being young Kiwi. But very vulnerable situation indeed. And I mean, if my daughters, who are now 26, were in that situation, I'd actually be really panicking. I think it's just as well my mother didn't know. I didn't tell her.
Yeah. For anyone that might sort of say to you, well, that's not real homelessness, how do you come back to them in response to that? Because obviously that's not the truth behind it. Or how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I was very lucky. I mean, it was a friend. Most people sofa surfing are extremely vulnerable,
Mm.
and it might not be a friend. It might be somebody exploiting them for, what do they have to do to earn the place on that sofa? What do they have to do to earn the right to be on that sofa or on that floor? That's the key question I think people need to ask themselves. I was very lucky. I mean, I didn't touch the sides with me. But yes, there are lots and lots of people in very, very difficult situations. Modern slavery is a thing. And if somebody hasn't heard that term before, just look it up. It's quite terrifying. It's rife in the UK. Some of the rough sleepers you see are they're under the umbrella of modern slavery. They're actually being put out to work to beg. So that's one aspect of it. Rough sleeping, or what people might term real homelessness, is the tip of a very, very large iceberg. It is, for every rough sleeper, there might be 30 cases of other types of homelessness. I don't know, that's not an exact figure, so don't quote that. But it's a huge amount. There are 375 households known to be homeless in the UK. Now, household
Can you
could
say that
be
number again, Bianca? Sorry,
375,000.
Yeah.
Sorry if I didn't say thousand.
No, that's all right, yeah.
375,000 households. Every household could be an individual or it could be a family. So you times that by however many individuals you think that there might be. It's a huge number. It's just absolutely huge number. So where are these people? They're not all rough sleeping, especially if they're a family, but they are living in hotels with no kitchen. So they're reliant on, how do they make their food? They're going to have to buy it. So where do they get the money to do that from? So that becomes a vicious trap. They might be in a B&B. They might be in a shipping container. They might be in someone's garage. They might just be hiding. They might be in a tent under a bridge somewhere, Dean.
And I
They might be
suppose
off-grid.
because in some instances, which are the ones you described, that kind of homelessness is almost invisible. It's not something that we can see and then have it, be stimulated to respond. Because we all, hopefully, a number of us feel motivated to respond when we see somebody on the streets experiencing that level of vulnerability. But there are people that are, as you said, sofa surfing or in areas where you can't see them, that they're as vulnerable. It makes it even more of a challenge, I suppose, to get people engaged and understand fully what they're supporting and the level of need that they're supporting as well. How do you bring that part of the conversation or the storytelling to life for people? To get them involved and engaged.
It is called hidden homeless. That's the kind of term that we do use. So I often use art.
Okay.
We have on a number of occasions worked with a photographer called Mark Davenant, who has exhibited beautiful photography. He's gone and photographed people's housing, people in their homes taking their stories, and it's jaw-dropping. Mums with kids with damp running down their walls, black mold, radiators that won't turn on, or even sometimes worse, won't turn off. So they're stuck in 30-degree heat. The conditions are just unbelievable that people are expected to live in. So you've got a huge rife slum housing sector in the UK that not many people know about because rental property has gone beyond what most people can afford. There's this kind of, I think the fundamental thing to remember is in the UK, there's not enough housing for people. There's just not enough homes. So if someone presents as homeless, council will put them on a list and prioritise them according to their needs. But quite often that list, there's like a 2-year wait for a home. And in that 2 years, you can be offered temporary accommodation. The people I know who've gone into temporary accommodation have gone into things like shared tenement. So a person I know who had teenage twins was put in a shared tenement building, no lock on the door, next to known sex offender. So you've got this horrendous situation where, okay, you'll take what the council offers you, but it might be absolutely detrimental to your life and well-being to do so. So another example might be the council might offer you some housing. And I've done a deal with another council. They say, well, the council 125 miles away has got some housing for you, so we're going to put you there. Okay, well, does that mean I take my kid out of school? Does that mean I give up my job that I'm scraping by on, but I still value my job? Does that mean I'd have to take a 2-hour bus trip to get anywhere to do that job or to collect my kid from school? Does that mean I have to destabilize my whole family to move into that accommodation.
Mm.
So if you choose to say no, Dean, to that offer, you become intentionally homeless and you're out on your own.
So it puts you in a
There's
really
no
difficult
support there at
position.
that point. So it's a very scary and vulnerable place to be. And I think we're in very scary and vulnerable times, just given the kind of inequality that's rampaging through at the moment. And, rental incomes have outstripped what most people can afford. And they've certainly outstripped, universal credit housing allowance. So if you happen to be on universal credit and you thought you could get by on a housing allowance and your landlord suddenly says, whatever, you've got to find somewhere else. Luckily, balances are coming into place and have been put in place, so by mid-year this year, a landlord's not going to be able to do that quite so easily. But at the moment, somebody can be put out, and in their area, are they going to be able to find somewhere that they can afford? Chances are no. So then what do they do? There's a dilemma for a lot of people, and it's been a very precarious time.
Are you able to see any trends from the conversations you're having and the organisations you're supporting where the incidence of homelessness, whether visible or otherwise, is increasing, or is it levelling off? Is it getting better? What sort of trends are you seeing or hearing about when you're having your conversations?
It's increasing, and it's increasing not only in the cities, it's increasing in the smaller towns, it's increasing where you'd never expect to see it. And we start to see tent cities back again. So cardboard cities, tent cities. And rough sleeping's definitely on the increase. And if rough sleeping's on the increase, that points to increases in all types of homelessness and increases in other social justice issues, I would say, as well.
I suspected that to be the case because anyone will notice the difference in terms of what disposable income they have at the end of the month because of the rising cost of living. Just going to the supermarket and getting your weekly shop or monthly shop or however you do it, things are much more expensive. So it must be more challenging for people, and it must be putting more people in that vulnerable or precarious situation where from one month to the next, they don't know whether they can meet the bills and commitments that they have. And then one thing leads to another, and some of the sorts of scenarios that you've described are starting to happen. Thank you for that. I'm really interested, Bianca, in terms of your background, that you talked about, particularly when you were starting off and without the benefits that AI can bring. You have to use a number of different skills to deliver the sorts of things that you're doing. And I'm really interested to know how you develop those skills. Did they come from a career where you were CEO prior to becoming a CEO for CEO Sleep Out? Where did you develop those skills, or was it on the job learning?
It was partly on the job learning, but I came to the job with already the ability to kind of run a business. So I was MD of Calm Digital before CEO Sleep Out, and, understanding small business, I guess, directorship is, it's really stood me a good stead because I do run CEO Sleep Out like a very tight ship in a business that's very, very lean indeed. I mean, the difference between a charity and a small business is a small business can get away with its costs almost being the equivalent of its turnover. At a charity, my costs have to be 25% thereabouts of my income. So we have to keep our costs mighty low. And, how anyone does it, I don't know, but I have managed to do that for the whole entirety of me being chief exec of the organization. So, that's a difficult thing, but, we make it work, and we do what we can, and it's all hands on deck. In terms of the other skills, I came with marketing knowledge. I came with digital marketing knowledge. I came with brand storytelling knowledge. Came with the ability to public speak, do keynotes, all of that kind of stuff. But there are some things that you sort of, I guess, that I learned that I had on the job, which is the softer skills of relationship building, being able to bring people with me in terms of being a voice for social justice. Yeah, being able to galvanize people for a cause, behind a cause. I did not know I had that in me, and I kind of learned that about myself as I went on.
Great, thank you for that. We talked about your why and it being a big question, an opening question. Sometimes people's whys change over time and they evolve over time as their own circumstances and situations change. From those early days to the scale of work that you're doing now, has your why evolved? Has it changed? Has your focus shifted a little bit?
It has shifted. I mean, I really hit on this thing that I thought, I've been in business. I've been a person in a small business. I've been that person who's been slightly unfulfilled did make me sick. It did, if we're honest. And I don't think I'm alone in being, a person who's built a business, who looks at that business in the world and it doesn't walk like them, it doesn't talk like them, it doesn't share their values. If you have invested your creative energy and your blood, sweat and tears in building something, birthing something into the world, and it doesn't really have your essence in it, it's just out doing its thing, I think that's quite soul destroying. And I really do feel, I think what I've hit on is this idea of the values of the leader need to be imbued in the business.
Yeah.
And way more than just lip service. Really that business has to show and demonstrate those values in everything it does. So this is where social value comes in. I think the easiest way for a business to do that is to look at how it can make a difference, look at how it can get involved in its communities, its stakeholders, and actually start to create that social value. So how can we return value to everybody we touch and our communities and the footprint that we're operating within and the ecosystem we're operating within? And so I think that my why really is also now about encouraging businesses to act like a person with a heart and do more, and do what more can they do? What more can they do in their, they famously don't have a conscience, businesses, do they? They famously have the rights of a being without the conscience of a person, so let's make it that somebody goes into business because they want to make a difference, because they want to solve a problem, because they want to make money, but also they want to make a difference. I do think if you're measuring success from your turnover/profit alone, that's very empty. There's got to be an empty feeling. Measure success on how much value are you returning, not only to your shareholders, but all your stakeholders, your workforce, the families and kids of your workforce, your ecosystem, your supply chain, all the things, and your local community. And I've got a little formula, Dean. You take the values of the leader, you survey what matters to the workforce. So you kind of work out what they care about. Look at the immediate needs in your community and where the biggest needs are. Look at the resources within your organization, and you just map all that together, and that should spit you out a kind of a social value target focus. And then you go ahead and you actually use those resources in your business to deliver that. You bring your workforce with you. They're happy because they're feeling like they're doing something that is meaningful. You're happy because you're seeing your values lived out through your business, and your community wins. So it's a win-win. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. And I think then, so when I asked that question about how your why has evolved, and the answer turned into not just how your why has evolved, also how your approach has evolved, but then how you try and encourage other organizations, other people you're touching, how you can encourage them to evolve as well. And then you talked about those organizations being not having a conscience, but within them, because they've got people in them, developing a conscience with them, not through just that single leader, but through the entire workforce. So it does become almost a living, breathing organism of good, I think, is kind of what I got from that. And the idea that... Yeah, but I love it. And I think that the idea that, then individuals within the organization can share their interests and their passions where they want to have an impact and make change. And that idea that they can then own that process, it becomes an authentic thing rather than something that is a box ticking exercise. We've achieved that part of our CSR strategy, or whatever you want to call it. I just find that really inspirational. So when you're talking to business owners about that, how are you finding their response? Do you find that they're open to that approach? Is it a challenge to bring that kind of mentality, a way of working, into their way of working?
Well, I think they all love the idea of it, Dean, but the reality is that they've been thumped with, national insurance, tax, and, life's not easy for a small business owner at this minute in time. I think of all the places where government could have collected tax, small business is one of the last places they should be collecting it. The other last place is kids with student loans that they need to repay. But anyway, that's another story. They should be incentivizing small business. This is the real value creators in our society, Dean. This is the people employing 16 million of us, turning over 32 trillion. Small business is returning value in the real economy. It's not sucking wealth up to shareholders BlackRock and Vanguard. It is returning velocity of money into communities. So small businesses need to be supported in a much better way. So my primary audience is these small business leaders, SMEs. And so they want to do good, but they are absolutely squeezed beyond belief, Dean, at this minute in time. And I've got to appreciate that. Not to say they're not doing great things in their communities and they're not doing good and they don't have great social value plans. They do, and they do want to do this. But at this minute in time, they're just making sure that they are making, that everybody's getting paid, that there's enough in the tanks. Hopefully things will change for small business. Like I say, I think it's the last sector that should be penalised, but it is the power base of the UK. It's the engine room of the UK, our small business base. And we need to recognise it as such. And I just do think that if I can move these people to action, and, I've just made a massive a caveat, not excuse, but a caveat. There are always people at every single sleep out that will tell me, oh, I've done this because of CEO Sleep Out. So there are things that people are putting in place because they've had that wake-up call. Yeah. Always.
Yeah. I can see that. I can completely see how that would happen. You were almost then touching on politics and policy. Do you have an opportunity to impact on policy, not just around homelessness, but you talked about, the impact of increasing taxes on small businesses. Are there places that you can take that message to that makes change in that area as well?
I haven't done so yet, but I'd like to get in front of policymakers in a much more meaningful way. One of those ideas is create a charter that people who come to Sleep Out can put their name to and their business name to, and actually just build that up to the point where actually this charter exists. Anyone could see it online and effectively maybe the CEO Sleep Out website with all the lists of participants is that charter. But in any case, that is something I want to improve and try and become a kind of a social justice voice, and get in front of policymakers and see what we can do.
Thank you.
I think the voice of business is a powerful one.
Absolutely, yeah. As you said, it's the beating heart of the UK economy. With regards to the events, and we talked about evolution of your why, can you talk about what the first Sleep Out event may have looked like? Can you remember what your first Sleep Out event looked like and perhaps how it's changed from then to now?
It was absolutely amazing. So the first one I took part in was the one I was mentioning. Andy Preston twisted my arm. He said, come down to the Riverside Stadium. I'm going to do a CEO Sleep Out. Raise a bit of money and, we can share that out among charities in Middlesbrough and Stockton. So I went along not knowing what to expect. And about 50 people from the area were there, boots blacked and kind of, puffer jackets on. It was March. It was absolutely bitterly cold, but the camaraderie was unbelievable. Everybody had a conversation with each other. Everybody was supportive and, there was I had my guitar, so I played a bit of guitar there. Dean, you'd have loved that. You could have got yours out. Yeah, no, it was phenomenal. I actually thought this has really got legs. There were no plans to kind of develop it after that, but I thought it did have legs, and it wasn't long that Andy joined forces with Newcastle United Foundation and our now chair, Abu Ali, to get the first official CEO Sleep Out under its own charity, the CEO Sleep Out UK.
Yeah.
To get that going in Newcastle. And from there, it just sort of grew. I should say Andy grew it in his own spare time until the point where I came on board.
Have you got any sense of how many Sleep Outs you've actually achieved since the organisation started and since you were kind of leading it as well?
I know I've done over 100, Dean, but wow. I have kind of lost count. But I've done over 100.
Are you allowed to say what your favourite Sleep Out has been so far? Is there such a thing as a favourite Sleep Out? That's the thing I do.
That first one on Milton Keynes was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was so amazing. And we raised £78,000. Yeah. It was really it was a phenomenon. It was really, really amazing. But there's so many that I've loved. There's so many. I mean, waking up in Durham Cathedral, for example, that's really special. Leeds Castle, Lords every year with 150 people. It's bananas. There was one Lords where we had a guy come in and teach us the haka.
Okay. Well, that's very appropriate.
It was amazing. So, I mean, there's been too many favourites to count, but I mean, hometown, Riverside, Middlesbrough is always great.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've been lucky. I've woken up in some unbelievable places.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for
I
that.
slept with a lot of people.
Yeah. You can say that with pride.
Yeah.
How do you strike the balance between creating a sort of a powerful experience for your participants, for the people that sleep out with you, and respecting what rough sleeping actually means for those living with it every night? And because there is that balance, I think it should be an enjoyable experience, because that will encourage people to want to participate in the future. But equally, they also need and probably want to feel a sense of challenge, so that they can empathise to some degree. But I don't think you can ever truly empathise with somebody that sleeps out night after night after night in the coldest of temperatures, with no food in their bellies. How do you get that balance?
Yeah, and we've got to be very careful. I mean, I always say this is a business event with a twist.
Mhm.
We're allowed to have fun. It's a business fundraiser, and we'll never come close to what it must be like for somebody who is forced to sleep rough, who feels that anxiety and terror, who really does not know, where the safest place to be is, doesn't have a home, doesn't have a stability, doesn't have a support network. We can't imagine any of that, but we can have a night's sleep that isn't the most comfortable, is a bit cold,
Mhm.
probably will do some lying awake at some point. And in those hours of lying awake, my ask is that somebody contemplates the what more can I do piece.
Mhm.
And how could I do this for more than tonight?
Mm.
The answer is I couldn't
Mm.
for most people.
Mm.
And I think that is the very powerful wake up call. I think the second thing that we always do is we have testimony from people who've lived through rough sleeping and overcome homelessness.
Mm.
And this lived experience perspective is huge, because it really does unlock a level of understanding and compassion
Mhm.
that the event, without having somebody be there who's to tell their story, we couldn't really get to that place without looking someone in the eye who's been through that. And quite often the person that will have to talk is a person in business.
Mhm.
So they're mirrors to ourselves, and somebody who, has the same, it makes us realize, I guess, that we all have the same hopes and fears,
Mm.
and deserving of the same amount of care
Mhm.
and compassion.
Have you learned about what really sort of motivates CEOs when they say yes to something so far outside of their usual world? What motivates them to engage in something like this, do you think? And have you learned things about this process of getting people involved in something so important and worthwhile?
Well, there's the element of challenge. It's not a huge challenge. It's not like running a marathon, but people do feel like they've done something utterly monumental when they wake up in the mornings.
Mhm.
So there's that. And there's an element of genuine care
Mhm.
for the cause. But a lot of it is, oh, we're doing this as a collective. I need to get behind it. So there's a layer of, I guess there's a layer of genuine meaning that hasn't been accessed by somebody, but they just want to be part of it because it's a good thing to do. That's great. Then there's another layer below that of, well, I just want to be part of it because it's a great networking
Mm.
opportunity. Now, that is also valid. And if somebody thinks, well, I'm just going to come because, okay, I'm raising the money, but I get access to all these great business leaders, that's absolutely fine by me, because I say, do it anyway. We benefit. You might have the wake up call of your life. We're there to change lives. The lives we change might even be your own. We open your eyes to some of the immediate issues on your doorstep. And so it can only be a good thing. I don't care why somebody comes. And then the other layer is somebody might come just to do a bit of virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Well, again, I say, if you stand accused of virtue signaling, do it anyway,
Mhm.
because it's a good thing.
Mm.
And if you're coming because you want to do a bit of virtue signaling, fantastic.
Mm.
Come and virtue signal with us. As long as you're raising the money and doing the good, it's all good.
I
And I
suppose.
guarantee you will leave a different person as the person who came.
Yeah, I suppose what you're trying to do is tap into whatever those motivations are, because in the end, you want engagement. You want people to be raising the profile of the cause that you're supporting, and you want to raise as much money as possible. And whatever has motivated that individual to be there, if they're raising money and it's then making or having an impact on people's lives, then that can only be a good
Yeah,
thing.
it is a
Have
good thing,
you
yeah.
seen the engagement that you started getting with CEO evolve? And can you describe how that's grown and shifted in terms of its reach and then the impact that sustained support and growth of that support has had, both in terms of the work you're doing and then the impact it has more broadly with the people you're trying to support?
Yeah. So very organically, the reach and reputation has grown. And we do an amount of marketing, but not, it's not huge. It's basically what we can do ourselves via social media. We don't really pay for a lot of marketing support. We don't advertise. We have our website. We do a bit of Google pay-per-click, but that's not much. We do a few Facebook ads. It's not a lot.
Yes.
The majority, and the reason it's snowballed, is because we're tooling our participants up to do their own campaign, and we're getting better at it. And this year they'll have a campaign, how to run your fundraising campaign pack with everything in it. We haven't done that before, but we've tooled them up to actually go and make a splash about it. And when we shout somebody out who signs up, so Dean Jones has signed up for Milton Keynes, fantastic, what a guy. That hits your network, it hits our network, and all of your peers see that you've done that and think, what's this going on? So therefore there's that user-generated piece that's really important to us, especially if you go ahead and comment or share on that. That user-generated piece does a far bigger job than we could ever do at getting the word out in your local area. So we rely on our participants, and they don't even half the time realize how much they're helping by doing it, but they are. And that means that when I could go into a pub in London and somebody's chatting me up at the bar saying, so what do you do? I say, well, I run a charity called the CEO Sleepout. They'll say, I've heard of that. Or if I'm at a festival in Oxfordshire, someone says, what do you do? I say, I run a charity called the CEO Sleepout. Oh, I've heard of that. That's where we're at. And it blows me away every single time. Those two examples are real examples, by the way.
Did you ever imagine that it would reach the scale that it has? And do you get a sort of sense of imposter syndrome around that sometimes? Or is it all part of the plan?
Obviously, I would like to grow it more, Dean.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to... I have imposter syndrome creeping in all the time. And I also think, could another CEO have done a better job at making it bigger, brighter, whatever? But I'm personally very happy with how I've stewarded the charity over the last 9 years. And kept it lean and kept it solid. I could have scattergunned. We could have done CEO everything. CEO skydive, CEO this, that, and the other. And we could have done this real scattergun approach to try and just be all things to all people. And I just felt very strongly that if we stay in our lane, we'll create a steady, reliable growth path that is going to actually deliver that 500,000 in grants every year. And I think that's really, really important. So, yeah, I weigh up things all the time, but I think the way we've grown it, slow and steady, has been the right thing to do.
Yeah, and really inspirational as well. You mentioned the sort of £500,000 a year. Do you have a sense now what sort of figure you've achieved in the 9 years you're referring to that you've led the organisation? How much have you raised in total so far, do you think?
Yeah, 5 million. So it's
Wow.
6.2 million in total. So I think since I've been at the helm, it's 5 million.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, amazing. I spotted...
I feel that that's not
enough.
Compared to other charities. That's...
Yeah, well...
I'm proud of it, don't get me wrong, but I think...
I do understand, yeah, and that's another question that's come on to about the sector and competition, but we'll come on to that in a moment. Before we do, just focusing on your achievements, I spotted a photo of you not so long ago shaking hands with a particular member of the royal family. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that came about and what that meant to you in terms of your mission and what you're trying to achieve, if anything?
It was King Charles, and it was a phenomenal thing. I just got a notification that I'd been invited to St. James's Palace. And when I understood what actually goes into being invited, they had the Secret Service in New Zealand looking into me. Wow. They would have had, MI5 looking into me to make sure that I was all good to go. And so then you get this invite, and I was there as part of the New Zealand High Commission, people doing good things in the Commonwealth. And the amazing thing about that story is that my childhood friend and secondary school mate Victoria Armstrong was also invited for her own achievements.
Wow.
And so we got to go together.
Wow.
Two girls from the same school.
Well, the chances
Now,
of that.
I think you asked me about my skill set and how I was kind of CEO sleep out primed. The school I went to was called Samuel Marsden Collegiate School for Girls in Wellington.
Okay.
And that's a school who basically hothoused us to be something in this world and to not be held back by anything, including, any kind of inequality agendas, or we were just led to believe that we could go out there and do anything. And I think that stood me in really good stead.
Is that something that's unique to New Zealand culture, do you think? I don't know enough about it, but is there something in that?
Yeah, it's not unique. It's not unique to New Zealand culture, but it is a result of growing up in New Zealand.
Yeah.
New Zealand's a place that, it was the first place to give women the vote, equality. I grew up, believing there was, and obviously there wasn't, but my perception was there was equality. We've had 3 female prime ministers in my lifetime. So, New Zealand is a trailblazing place, and also we're pretty fearless bunch of people in New Zealand, and that's the type of spirit that's, talk about epigenetics here, the type of people who went to New Zealand as colonial settlers and forged a life in the landscape alongside, a native population of Maori and made it all work through a lot of trials, tribulations, and hard work. That's the genetic inheritance that I have. And so working hard is a trait of New Zealanders, and working hard to achieve something is a trait of New Zealanders.
Fascinating. I don't think we moved quickly on from your encounter with the king, so we better go back there.
Sorry.
Yeah. I think that was fascinating. It was my fault. I distracted from the question.
Yeah. So I was there at Commonwealth, and I said to him, "You're going to help me bring business leaders together to solve homelessness." And he went, "I've tried that. We can do this. We could." And he said something, and he walked down the line, because the part's like the Red Sea, so he can kind of meet people. And he circled back to me.
Right.
He goes, "It's not impossible."
And that's where, because the picture has his finger pointing and laughing.
Yeah, he's going, "It's not impossible."
Yeah, okay. That's a really good insight. And because obviously his son also is very passionate about the subject of homelessness. And I don't know how much they communicate and sort of share their, experiences and their thoughts on this area. But you'd imagine that the future king will also have something to say and want to do something about this issue around homelessness. There is a link, and hopefully the conversation that you had with our current king will be passed on. And because it's interesting, isn't it? I was looking not just at the photograph, but how people engaged with that particular post that you put out on social media, and for whatever reason, it does resonate with people. People are interested in that part of our society and our culture, and the way that a royal family can sort of raise the profile of particular subject areas in a way that no other organisation or individual can. So
it was a year's worth of marketing in one hit, really, basically.
Yeah.
It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Regarding Homewards, which is Prince William's project, it's a really good project, and we're engaging with Homewards in Sheffield. And we're working out what we can do specifically from funds raised in Sheffield to kind of help move things forward in a real meaningful way, but bring business in Sheffield with us for that. So almost like a citywide ESG strategy, which I think would be a first. But I do think that this is something that we can start to table, citywide ESG strategies, where the whole business community gets to chip in and think, okay, where can we make the best difference, and actually all moves as one unit.
Could you just elaborate on the ESG element, just for those that perhaps aren't familiar with that abbreviation?
Yes, ESG is for corporates and PLCs it's a measurable, it's a data point for shareholders to see how they're doing on environmental, social impact, social value, and governance. So environment, social impact, and governance. Where I sit is the social layer, the S in ESG.
Yeah. And
social values. How are you returning value to stakeholders across your ecosystem, and how are you proving that? And there's and somebody uses, well, you can use different types of measurement, but you measure it usually using a government set of values called the TOMS. And you want to equate the work you're doing in communities and with charity to a kind of a monetary equivalent. And we can do that using the TOMS.
Great, thank you. Are you able to give me an anonymized story of someone who has experienced homelessness that has stayed with you and shapes the conversations that you're having? And I no doubt you get experiences and have conversations with a number of different people. Is there a particular one that's stuck with you that you share from a storytelling perspective, but also has stuck with you from an emotional perspective and kept that motivation to want to strive to do more in this area?
1,000,000%. And I don't actually need to keep this one anonymous. It's our lived experience primary ambassador, Kerry Douglas. Kerry was a child in the foster care system. And if you know anything about the foster care system, I think this figure will probably shock most people, but 2 out of 3 people who've been in foster care either end up in prison or homeless. It's a really shocking statistic.
Mm.
And so, we've got to fix a big problem upstream there. But anyway, Kerry found herself living in Cardboard City, where I was talking about in Leicester Square, as a 13-year-old, because that's where she actually felt the safest.
Wow.
That's where she found a family. And those people looked after her, and she ended up living there until she was 24.
Wow.
So she was 11 years on the streets of London. Kerry went on to have a child removed from her care, went back to the streets and fell pregnant with twins.
Right.
Kerry then also found out that she had Hep C and HIV on the same day. So decided then and there that she had to turn her life around to have a chance of A, surviving, and B, being a parent to these twins. And the twins are now 16. They're doing brilliantly. Kerry did turn her life around. She stabilized her life. But in the space of time that I knew her in the last 5 years, she had to flee a domestic situation. And she fled from Liverpool to Gateshead, and Gateshead Council, she was the one who was put up with her teenagers in this temporary tenement housing without a lock on the door and next to a known sex offender.
Right, okay.
So she's had really bad experiences, even second time round, and you'd think she'd know the system, but she's still a victim of the system. Now, I guess the upside of that story is she reconnected with her first child, who's 18. They've got a great relationship. The twins are doing fantastically well, as I said. Kerry's now in a stable home, which is great. She's also working, and she works sometimes for me on a consultancy basis.
Great.
She also runs her own business called Homelessness Inside Out, where she actually delivers workshops, keynote talks, and she's applied to be a TEDx speaker, and we think she's going to get the gig. So we'll just see. But I think she's on the up and up as Kerry. She's an inspirational human being.
It sounds very much like that. And I find the stories where you connect the people that have received your support with then going on to become supporters of one cause or another themselves. And it gets to the heart sometimes of that big question, what is your why? And I'd be really interested to know what she would say now about what her why is. And probably it will contain all sorts of things that perhaps we don't want to hear, but all sorts of things that have led to something quite positive in the end, which I suppose is something to be taken from what has otherwise been a really tricky, challenging situation for that individual. Thank you for sharing that information. It's very brave of that individual to share an anonymized story, her own personal story.
Nice.
I suppose that leads on to some of the final questions. And one of those is, what are the most persistent myths about homelessness that you keep having to challenge in your conversations with people?
I think people, when you say the word homelessness, people call to mind a substance abusing male who's sitting on the street, potentially begging, in a sleeping bag or whatever. And I've done, a big part of what I do every day and with every sleep out is humanize the many faces of homelessness and bring that mirror. It could be you, it could be me, to every CEO sleep out. And I do that in a lot of different ways, which is through the lived experience speakers, but also through the art, like I explained about Mark Davenant's photographs. And we're just trying to tell that story, that homelessness doesn't look like that anymore. It's a young woman who's trying to get her college, her A-levels together, but can't live at home. It's the person who's been a victim of domestic abuse and is staying in the car but showering at the gym or showering at work. It's loads of different faces of homelessness.
And when people say that it is loads of different faces and the problem's just too big. And how can one person like me make any difference to this massive issue with so many different faces? How do you sort of push back on that to ensure that you don't lose that potential support from that individual?
Well, it's collective support. So if you actually get on board with CEO Sleep Out, there's a collective action that's happening that's making the impact of what you do ever greater. So that's number one. But like I say, we're just that wake up call. From there, it's the difference you can make as you go about your day-to-day business, in your business, that can make a greater impact. So what more can you do? And I think those two things for me are really where it's at. I mean, Greta Thunberg taught us that we're never too small to make a difference. I think if you're acting within your sphere of influence, that is absolutely true. You act where you can make a difference, and then it's not just a drop in the ocean, is it? It is actually collectively making a bigger difference than what you could have ever imagined.
And there is a way that an individual can make a bigger difference. And some of those would be through things like long-term ongoing support, say a monthly donation or things like that. Does your model enable people to continue supporting CEO Sleep Out beyond the sleep out, if that makes sense?
Not traditionally. And that's the thing, when we talk about that 6 million figure, and I'm proud of that, but that's because we've only ever achieved fundraising through generous people who've chosen to sleep out, putting their hat around and raising sponsorship or donating themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't asked for that legacy ask. We haven't asked for that ongoing ask. But I have just last week set up Give As You Live. So if somebody wants to do their shopping and chuck it our way, chuck a bit of cash our way, then we've got that set up now so they can do that, which I think is a nice way of doing it. But no, we don't ask for monthly donations. What we do have is an opportunity for corporate partnerships. And especially now as we're investing money in bricks and mortar projects like nap pads. Mm-hmm. So in York, we've got a suite of prefabricated tiny suites where somebody can go, and it's really for the person who's been one night rough sleeping and there's a place for them and they happen to be lucky enough to get that place. They can go into this tiny suite with a wash basin and a bed and actually have their own key. They can come and go as they please. So it stops that person from becoming entrenched on the streets. And that's in York. And we want to roll that out to every city that we're in. So we need funding to do that. So corporate partnerships are the big ask for that. And that's how a business or an SME can say, okay, can align with our brand, which obviously has a great reputation, is doing good, and do something in their city that makes a genuine difference to people sleeping rough.
That's great. And that leads nicely on to the next question, which is about an instance where you've had a business leader who's been involved with Sleep Out and really shows the kind of transformation that you're aiming for. Can you kind of think of any particular business leaders that have really engaged and sort of transformed themselves, and also in terms of the approach they have to support this particular cause or challenge?
Yeah, well, there's been so many. So I can give you examples of the things that they've done. Mm-hmm. But in terms of recalling one particular one, I'm not sure I can think to the top of my head of one particular one. Mm-hmm. But things like signing up to the Living Wage Foundation for the lowest paid employees, that's really important. Mm-hmm. Taking on apprenticeships from hard to reach groups, setting up trainings for people to come along to. Mm-hmm. What else? Setting up funds for Christmas funds for their employees to kind of save into. Mm-hmm. There's loads of things people have done. Mm-hmm. And they've shared with me, and that they're kind of far-reaching and far-ranging, but they all fall under that social value banner. So, yeah, I'm quite happy with the kind of the influence that we have. But I do, I wish I could measure it more and understand it more.
You've obviously built a really powerful model, I think. Are there any sort of ethical questions that you wrestle with around this kind of fundraising beyond what we've touched on already? Are there things that you kind of go to bed at night thinking, am I doing the right thing, or should I do it differently?
I think I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, good.
I think I'm doing a good thing. I'm doing a fun thing. It's, like I say, it's not, I don't operate on the front line, Dean, so I don't have to, I do the very pleasant thing of bringing business leaders together mm-hmm. and then making sure the money goes to good charities. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it day in, day out. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'd be cut out for that. Mm. they do it amazingly well. And I'm pleased to be a funnel of funds for their great work.
Yeah, you found a way to make a difference that aligns with your skills and what you're able to bring. Dealing with such a sort of heavy subject day in, day out, how do you stay grounded and keep your voice authentic, actually?
I just am authentic. I mean, I just think I believe in what I'm saying, and, staying in my lane is really, really important. So I don't get tired of repeating the messages. I think that I'm one of many voices saying a same thing in different ways, and people need to hear it. So that's fine. Staying grounded. I mean, I didn't stay grounded for a very long time. I went hell for leather, and not for the first time in my life, I hit burnout in 2020, Dean.
Right.
And I was we were in lockdown, but I went through cancer treatment.
Right.
So, but I was also running, I thought, we can't stop this. People need us. So we did virtual sleep outs, and that was amazing. And so I decided that I needed to design in a buffer and grounding into my life for my own well-being. So that's where the team came from, and it just allows me more time to have a more balanced, I guess, life. And I don't sleep out at every single sleep out now. I share them amongst the team, and actually the team squabble over who's going to do what sleep out because they love it so much.
Well, that's a nice position to be in. And that's an inspirational story in itself, Bianca, and one which I wasn't aware of at all. Just how you did that, and obviously that particular time was challenging enough as it was without the other things that you'd had to experience. For anyone listening who wants to lead in the sort of space that you're leading in, not necessarily directly related to homelessness, but this kind of experiential fundraising, what's the most honest piece of advice that you could give somebody who might be sort of considering this as a model for fundraising and setting up a charity?
Well, it starts with your own values system. You need to understand what those values are, and they are the compass that's guided every decision you've ever made in your life. And I always, if I'm in a room and I'm sort of taking a workshop or a lecture, or a keynote, sort of get a show of hands and say, who's actually sat and contemplated what those driving values are that's led you to where you are today? And a lot of people haven't done that exercise, Dean. So that's the starting point. Really think, okay, what values, what do I care? What matters to me? What's driven every decision? What's been my compass? And then start from there. And I think that's where then you find, if you want to have a job with influence, that influence is authentic. You're kind of backed up by your inner guidance. There's a strength there. You really believe in what you're saying, and that makes all the difference. If you're out there leading, I think it's non-negotiable. You have to believe in what you're doing.
Understanding your own why, almost, to give you that guiding force. Thinking 5 to 10 years ahead, what does success look like for CEOs Sleep Out and the wider movement? You touched on the area you're moving into in York with what did you call them?
Nap pads.
Nap pads, yeah.
So my accent might not give you
nap
as in have a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pads. So we want those in every city where we're operating. And we also want our fundraising to go well over $1 million every year. We want multiple events and we want to cover every city and town in the UK and Scotland. We've already got Aberdeen, and we go from Aberdeen to Brighton this year and everywhere in between. I want London to become something really special. I want it to smash 500,000 every year and be a huge thing in the business calendar, and potentially open up a second one in London at St. Paul's or somewhere like that. There's plans, and I think this idea of not being all things to all people, but I am exploring doing a night walk across London's bridges, because I think that ties in nicely with, the idea of homelessness. So a night walk in London could be on the cards, even as early as this year. So watch this space. But yeah, 5 years' time, I think it's still a galvanizing voice of business, has way more political clout, can actually get in front of policymakers and be a campaigning voice on that front as well.
That's it's almost like you've seen the questions before, but it leads nicely on to this next question, which is, if you could secure, with the support of your business community, one policy or systematic change that would make the biggest difference in the area of homelessness, what difference would that be? It's probably an obvious answer to that question, but it may be more nuanced than I think.
Well, The obvious answer is build more homes. We need 125,000 homes every year for 5 years just to meet the immediate backlog.
Mm-hmm.
We are nowhere near. We are nowhere near. So, I mean, the last announcement by government was, we're building 19.
And just give me that number again as to what we need.
You need 125,000 a year for 5 years.
And you mentioned that currently we're on
400,000.
19,000. Okay. Some work to do there. If every CEO listening to this acted on just one thing after hearing you, what would you want them to do? What would you want that to look like?
Well, they need to come and experience CEO sleep out. And then when they are lying awake at 3 a.m, they can be thinking, okay, my business has this resource available, this resource is available, this resource. This is what my team care about. This is what our workforce cares about. This is where we're going to focus our energy and start thinking about how they're going to actually build that bake those policies, procedures, actions into their business so that it becomes part of their day-to-day life. And they're measuring success, not just on the bottom line, but on how well are they doing in the community? How much value are they really returning?
Thank you. We've now reached the end of sort of formal part of the interview, but there are just a couple of quick fire closing questions just for a bit of fun. And the first is tea or coffee, Bianca, and how do you like it?
Tea.
Tea.
Colour of the manila envelope. No sugar.
No sugar. Okay. And are you an early bird or a night owl? I'd assume you're a night owl, but I could be wrong. Okay.
I like 10 hours sleep, so I'm an early nighter and a late riser.
Right. Okay. That's the first answer like that.
I do get up at 7 every morning, but I hate it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you for that. After a particularly heavy day, hearing stories from the homelessness world, what's your way to switch off?
I listen to audiobooks, I play the piano, I play the guitar, I write songs, and I'm writing a book.
Great. Wow. Look
So
forward to
switching off, I'm not sure. Definitely the music helps me switch off, but yeah.
What's one thing about you that might surprise people who only know your public sort of CEO role?
I'm a disco queen. Anything disco, and I'm there in my full 70s regalia, giving it large.
Richie?
Oh, it's got to be, I think, Sister Sledge, she's the greatest dancer or something like that.
Yeah, that's great.
Real classic.
Brilliant.
Disco, Nile Rodgers based amazingness.
Good answer. Final question for anyone moved by this conversation who wants to get involved with CEO Sleep Out or homelessness support more broadly, what's the best next step that they can take?
So get on my website, ceosleepout.co.uk. Listen, I think, like I say, the first thing is get involved with us, because then all the pathways to how you can support your local community open up to you. That's the gateway. It's the eye opener. It's that wake up call. It is the one that opens the door to your involvement with your community. And we bring a broad spectrum of charities in the poverty, homelessness, hunger space together. So you can actually take a call and say, okay, who do I want to get involved with?
Great. Thank you. Bianca, thank you so much for an honest and open conversation and for pulling back the curtain on what it really takes to get business leaders out of the boardroom and onto the pavement, not for a photo op, but to confront reality and commit to action. You've given a vivid sense of the human stories behind homelessness, the power and pitfalls of experiential fundraising, and how CEO Sleep Out builds bridges between influence, resources, and frontline need. You've also been really candid about the leadership tests, the ethical tensions, and what it means to carry this work day after day when the problem feels endless, but the stakes couldn't be higher. To everyone listening, I hope this episode has made you think harder about homelessness where you live and about the influence and responsibility you hold to shift attitudes, budgets and policies in your own sphere. And if you found this conversation thought-provoking or useful, please like, follow and subscribe to the Night Owl Philanthropy podcast on your usual platform and share it with a colleague or a friend or a CEO who leads a business, works in policy or cares about social justice. Thank you, Bianca. In our next episode, I'll be speaking with Melanie Beck, MBDL, a charity leader whose journey has taken her from elite sport into championing inclusion, opportunity and community through her work with disabled adults. And we'll be talking about what sustained leadership looks like over decades and how to build organisations that feel genuinely human and the role place-based charities can play in holding communities together. So do stay tuned for that. because it's going to be just as interesting as the conversation you've just heard. Thank you.